This is the fifth in a series of 6 tutorials where we discuss the 6 basic principles of spiritual practice. If you would like to view this presentation in full screen mode, please click on the full screen button on the bottom right hand side. Now do refer to our earlier tutorial, an introduction to the basic principles, to understand the importance of these principles. Now the fifth basic principle states that we should do spiritual practice relevant to the times that we live in. And by times, we mean the 4 eras that the universe passes through. Since the creation of the universe, mankind has passed through 4 main eras. And the 4 main eras are Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and Kaliyuga. According to the era that we live in, spiritual science recommends specific types of spiritual practice. The recommended spiritual practice for an era is the one that the majority of people in that era can take up easily, according to their spiritual capacity, and that results in rapid spiritual progress. Before we explain this in more detail, we need to understand a principle of the universe, that there is a time for all things to happen in life. If the right thing happens at the wrong time, then the desired result is not achieved. Let's look at a couple of examples that will help to crystallize the importance of the timing with which we do certain activities. Suppose we were to sow seeds in the dry season instead of the rainy season. They do not take root no matter how fertile the land is. A child has to grow up to be an adult before it can consider marriage. So also with every era of the universe, depending on the spiritual maturity of society, specific spiritual practice or paths to God are recommended. Do refer to our tutorial on the 4th basic principle, which explains what is spiritual level or spiritual maturity. The first era of the universe was Satya Yuga, which lasted for over 1.7 million years. This was a very spiritually pure era, when the most spiritual level of a person was 70%, and this is the spiritual level of a saint. As they were so spiritually evolved, the path of knowledge was best suited to them, as they had the potential to spontaneously understand the implied meaning of all the spiritual scriptures. At this spiritual level, one is able to access the universal mind and intellect directly. Treta Yuga was the second era of the universe, and it lasted for close to 1.3 million years. This was the era when the spiritual level of the average person dropped to 55%, and so they lost their potential to follow the path of knowledge. But they were spiritually capable enough to undertake severe penance. For example, chanting when standing on 1 foot for 12 years, and meditation continuously for years in solitude. While these examples seem extreme in our present times, the physical, mental, as well as spiritual capacity of people in that era was suitable for such severe penance and intense meditation. Then came Dwapar Yuga, which lasted for over 800,000 years. There was a further decline in spiritual levels, and most people were around the 35% spiritual level. People lost their potential for rigorous penance and sustained meditation. So it was divinely ordained that they would be able to make progress through ritualistic worship. These rituals and sacrificial fires were very time-consuming and laborious, as they had to be done after collecting the right ingredients. Along with this, there were numerous steps which had to be followed to the last detail. But here again, people were religious-minded enough to spend the time and effort and money to do them. The last and final era of the universe is known as Kaliyuga, or the era of strife, and will last for over 400,000 years. We are currently some 5,100 years plus into this era. The most spiritual level has dropped to only 20%, and our capacity to do any of the above spiritual practices as in the earlier eras, has greatly reduced. The spiritual impurity or the raja-tama in the world has increased compared to earlier eras, and this has resulted in increased obstacles in spiritual practice. It is for this reason that the comparatively simple spiritual practice of chanting the name of God is recommended in today's era. Now, for those of you who are not doing any regular spiritual practice currently, but you do want to start your spiritual journey, you can do so by chanting the name of God according to the religion of your birth. Please refer to the tutorial on Start Your Spiritual Journey. And for those of you doing some kind of spiritual practice, you can think of complementing it with chanting the name of God, as it is a great way to make your spiritual practice continuous throughout the day. That's all for this presentation. Thank you for joining us.